all the mothers out there had a wonderful Mother's Day. And that you were celebrated. So today, we're going to talk about our freedom. And I get a little bit more specific. The reason I bring this up, and I can't remember the lady's name, but anyways, there was an incident in New York, Rochester, of a white woman saying the N-word to, I think it was a 5-year-old black child. And now there are people there that want her arrested. So let me say this. First and foremost, her using the N-word as a white person, we shouldn't be using it. Period. But at the same time, well, no, let me say this. One, we shouldn't be using it. Two, obviously it was the wrong thing to say to somebody that young, obviously. Though, who knows if he's hurt. I believe it was a boy, and I believe the boy is autistic from what I heard. Not knowing if this boy hears that word in his own family. I say that because being married to a black woman, my brother-in-law uses it all the time. He even uses it when he's talking to me. But if I were to say it, then of course it's wrong. But, you know, obviously black folks can say it all they want to, and for a lot it's not a derogatory term when they're saying it to either themselves or if they're talking to somebody else, you know, that they may or may not, you know, agree with or whatnot. So the term, depending on your skin color, is okay to use. Now, I don't agree that this lady should have used that term. No, I don't agree with it at all. No matter how mad you get, that's not the first word that should pop in your head. I don't know the details behind why she said what she said to this child, and that's not what this discussion is about. What this discussion is about is does she have the freedom to say it? The answer is yes, she does. Does free speech protect her for saying that particular word? Yes, it does. Was it right to use that word? I don't think it was right. But the First Amendment protects free speech, to include hate speech. For all y'all folks that haven't read the Constitution lately, or know the law, or just ignoring it, hate speech is protected speech. You ain't got to like it, but it's protected. As long as it's not causing physical harm, you don't have to like it, but it's protected. You don't have to like whatever, you know, white supremacist groups, but they have every right to walk down the street and say whatever they want as long as they're not physically harming anyone, because it's protected. You ain't got to like it, but it's protected. Same with BLM. They could spout all kinds of stuff about white people, and you don't have to like it, but it's protected. You don't have to like it, but it's protected. So for some in the black community that are calling for her arrest is absolutely outrageous. There are more important things you need to be concerned yourself with than a random white woman using the N-word, and then now you're wanting her arrested? Arrested for what? What are you arresting her for? For using a word? Did she physically harm that child? No. So I'm a little confused by the double standard of the N-word, one, and two, that people are so caught up in non-black people using the N-word that shouldn't be used by black folk anyways. Since you consider it a derogatory statement, why are you using it? So it's you're one, you're being hypocritical, and two, if you don't want white people saying it, then stop saying it yourself. Again, I'm just saying my opinion, and because I'm married to a black woman, and I have a brother-in-law who likes to use that word quite a bit, especially when he's drunk, I know what I'm talking about. For all y'all, they're going to say, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about, you're white. No, I do know what I'm talking about, because I have black in-laws, and they use the word quite a bit. So I don't like it when they say it, but of course I'm not going to say nothing about it, because grown folk are going to do what grown folk do. And since my wife won't tell them to stop using it, there's no sense in me trying to interject and tell them to stop using it. It's their house. It's their, it's their thing. I'm not offended by it, so I don't worry about it. I don't think it should be used, but hey. And again, others would argue, and I know this is coming too, others would argue, well, it depends on the last part of that word. Are you using it with an ER, or are you using it with an A? And supposedly there's a difference. So, okay, I get it, and thinking on it, I understand there probably is a difference in the way the word is spelled. Okay, gotcha. Shouldn't be used at all. And again, this woman shouldn't have used it. We all can agree on that. But for her to be arrested is one, way overreach, and two, she has the freedom to say it. You ain't got to like it. And no, we shouldn't be using the word. But then if you don't want other ethnicities to use the word, then stop using it yourself. And until that happens, other people are going to feel they can use it. And there are some people that are using it because they are racist. They're few, but they're out there. Racism does exist. There's no question about that. Are you racist for using that word? Maybe. People use the word because they hear other people using it, and so they feel they can use it. Some people are using it because they have a racist tendency, and so they're using that word in a derogatory way. There are both sides. There are many sides, and to the story. But how is it that we've come to this point to where freedom is only good when it doesn't offend somebody? When have we come to that? When have we come to the point of freedom? You're free to say whatever you want until it offends somebody. No, that's not freedom. Freedom of speech is exactly what it is. Freedom of speech. To include hate speech. You ain't got to like it, but it's protected. And like I've said, anything that you do or say has consequences, whether good or bad. And so those consequences will root out people that are trying to do bad. You are going to suffer the consequences of all your actions, whether physical actions or verbal actions. There are consequences. That doesn't mean you don't have the freedom to say or do whatever. You could punch somebody out if you want to, but there are consequences for that. You could say whatever you want, but there are consequences to that. I'm not endorsing what this woman said. Not in the least. She shouldn't have used the word. I agree. She shouldn't have used the word. I don't know what this child may or may not have done. And I don't know if she's the one that initiated the whole issue in the first place. I don't know, and truly don't care. But the simple fact of the matter is that you shouldn't have used the word. That should have not have been the first word that came out your mouth. If this child was doing something wrong, I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point of my vlog today is freedom. Was she and is she free to say that word? Yes, she is. Should we be saying it? No. Was it right to say it? No. In my opinion. But that doesn't take away the right of the fact that she could say it, nor does it precipitate her going to jail for it. That's stupid. That's a waste of money, time, and everything else by trying to put somebody in jail because you're offended by a word that you probably use all the time. So freedom is only good in the United States as long as you don't offend somebody. And a word can only be used if you're of the right ethnicity. So the derogatory term that was used against black people for decades and centuries is now used by black people for, I wouldn't say necessarily an enduring statement, but just use as regular speech, as part of the vernacular. What sense does that make? And again, we're talking mostly probably younger folk, because older folk know better. But nobody's saying, and if they are saying something, they're not loud enough. Because that's a word we shouldn't be using at all. Because again, it was intended as a derogatory statement back during slavery times and whatnot, and probably before. Now, of course, the word also is used as a color in certain languages. So what do you do about that? What do you got to say about that? Are you out there criticizing these other ethnic groups that word is used to denote the color of black, but they use a different word? Specifically the N-word, as we would call it. What do you say to them? Are you going to make them change their language? Of course you're not. Because it doesn't fit your narrative. They're not white. So this is what I'm saying. Our freedoms are being dictated to us by minorities that don't care about your freedom and only care about their freedom. When the freedom applies to everyone. Not just to minorities. The freedoms that we enjoy in the United States apply to each and every person, whether you're part of the majority, the minority, or regardless of your ethnic background. But why is it we still have people who are willing to take the freedom away because you're offended by a word? That in reality has been so overused that you shouldn't be offended by it no more. You know, I brought this up, you know, the old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words never hurt me. I agree with that, but I also understand that words do have meaning. But when the word, that N-word, and even into let's even throw in there racism, it's been so overused that it doesn't even have the same meaning anymore. Somebody calling somebody a racist doesn't have the same meaning when it's so overused. And it's used for all kinds of things other than what it was meant to be used for. Calling somebody racist doesn't have the same meaning anymore because it's so overused. People use it for everything. People use it every time some white person offends them, they call them racist. Or some other ethnic group like Hispanics or Asians. They call them racist, even though they're not being racist. But that's the word that's used. And it's so overused now, it doesn't have the same meaning. It doesn't hold the same weight anymore. Well, the N-word is the same way. If you're a white person or an Asian person or an Hispanic person using it, then you're considered racist. But if you're black, who is meant to be a derogatory term to, oh, it's okay if you say it. It's okay. It's okay. It's no big deal. We can say it, but you can't. Well, I can say the word, but you can't say the word. No, that's not right. Should we be using the word? Of course not. But is do I as a person, or do you have a person have the freedom to use the word? Yes, you do have the freedom to use the word. But there are people out there, to include myself, have enough wisdom and common sense to know not to use the word. And even before I met my wife, I knew not to use the word. Because it's a derogatory term. Just like there are white derogatory terms. But black folk ain't got no problem calling us all kinds of derogatory terms. But when they get called one, then they get offended. But they don't care who they offend. This is the problem. And I'm not talking about, obviously, a whole ethnic group. I'm talking about a small segment of the black population. They don't have a problem calling other ethnicities by derogatory terms. But if they were called the N-word, then all of a sudden they got an issue and they want to throw you in jail. For what? Exercising my First Amendment right? Again, there's no wisdom behind it. There's no thinking behind it. So you shouldn't be using it. You don't play their game. You don't lower yourself to their level. It's the same thing with folk that every other word is a cuss word. You obviously didn't learn anything in school. You have no vocabulary. You don't know how to talk. Again, this is my opinion. This is how I feel. If all you do is cuss every other word, you missed vocabulary in school. You have no vocabulary. You have no vocabulary. You don't know how to speak. There is a proper way to speak to people, and cussing every other word ain't it. And you're going to find that you're limiting yourself in the real world when you can't speak properly. And there's no such thing as speaking like white people. Speaking properly shouldn't only be done by white people. It should be done by everybody, regardless of ethnicity. There's a proper way to speak. Period. And I'm not talking about people with accents. I'm talking about actually speaking properly, knowing how to speak the words, knowing what you're saying, not just using words for words, but actually know what they mean. It's called going to school. It's called home training. It's not allowing society to dictate how you behave and how you speak and how you carry yourself. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. There's a proper way and there's an improper way. Period. There is no gray area. There's a right and there's a wrong way. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. And so our freedom is being taken away by individuals, not necessarily by the government, by individuals who are offended by what you say. And it's not just the N-word, which is the example I was using from the news. It's other words, other phrases. Sometimes it's because you think a different way than another person. They're trying to take your freedom away. Because I don't think like you do. The gentleman that left the comments on my Canada vlog about a week or so ago. He was respectful, no issues. He disagreed with me. He felt I was toting the party line, even though that's exactly what he was doing. All I was doing was giving my opinion of what I think about the situation in Canada. That's all. I wasn't toting the Trump line. I wasn't toting the whatever the prime minister name is in Canada now. I can't even remember his name off the top of my head. It's in the video. All I was saying was that I don't agree with the way a lot of their government policies, because they're more on the socialist side, which is fine. That's what the voters voted for. That's their right. All I was saying is that I have no problem if Alberta decided to leave because they don't feel they're being represented. Just like I said in the same video, I felt the same way about Scotland. If the Scottish people decide that they want to leave the UK, then by all means, as long as that's what the voters want. I ain't got no problem with that. And we even have a law in the United States where a state can't secede. It would take Congress and all this other stuff, but it's possible. No, would a country want a province or a state to leave? Of course not. But if the voters are feeling like the government is not representing them and they keep getting rebuffed by the government despite attempts to solve whatever issues they have, then that's their last course of action. And so this particular person, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, this particular person didn't like the fact that I had my stance and thought that I was toting the Trump line, which of course I was not. I have not cowered from the fact that I am a conservative. I'm a registered independent, but I'm a conservative. I have no shame in admitting that. I don't agree with everything Trump does. I had said, and I have said, that I wasn't necessarily a fan of all the tariff stuff. I had no issues with the reciprocal tariffs, but I had issues with all these other tariffs at the moment. At the moment they were done. I thought the reciprocal was enough because I agree that all countries, to include Canada, we have done us dirty and that we have a deficit. Even though Canada is our largest trading partner, that doesn't mean that we were being treated correctly, because there are a lot of things that we cannot sell in Canada. So, this gentleman disagreed. He felt that I should take his opinion. Well, no, I'm not taking your opinion. I respect your opinion, but I'm not taking your opinion because then it's not my opinion anymore. Why would I take your opinion? I'm not above changing my opinion or adjusting my opinion, but it's still my opinion. Why would I want to have your opinion? This is not your vlog, this is mine. But he was respectful, and I appreciated it that he left his comments. And as I told him, I said, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And I respect the fact that you love your country and that you feel that my opinions and comments didn't jive with yours, call me a common American, which I am, but I don't know if he meant that. He probably meant that in a derogatory way. Maybe not. Who knows? But I answered him in such a way to where I said, look, you have every right to feel the way you feel, and you have every right to disagree. Y'all can read the comments for yourself. Again, we're talking about freedom. I have a freedom to say whatever I want to say on my channel. And he had the freedom to leave a comment. All I ask is that you be respectful. And he was. So I have no problems with it. And I told him, I respect the fact that you disagree. I respect the fact that you have pride in your country. I'm all for that. That's great. But I disagree with you. And I told him I'm not touting a political line, even though you may think I am, and even though it may align with what the current administration does, doesn't mean I'm touting the party line. I'm just giving my opinion. If it aligns, it aligns. If it don't, it don't. It's just that simple. Your opinion sounds just like the party line of the party that just won the election in Canada. So I could have said the same thing about him, but I didn't go there with him. I just said, hey, look, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. It's just that simple. What he said about the indigenous was not factual, because if Alberta were to leave Canada, they have to do it with the indigenous, but they can do it. One party can't do it without the other. So what he said was unfactual. They still can secede from Canada. There is a provision or referendum that allows them to do that. But as was stated, they would not do that without the I can't even think of the word now. Without the concerns or whatnot of the indigenous folk of Alberta. And if it's anything like the United States, even if they were to leave, it probably wouldn't affect their lands at all. It would only affect the lands where, as they call them, first world people are occupied. Because not all of Alberta is occupied by first worlders. So again, I can cut through his argument easily, but that wasn't my intent. My intent was to allow this particular person, him or her, to state their comments, state their opinions. If I agree with it, great. If I didn't, that's fine too. Because a lot of what I said came out of the Premier of Alberta's mouth. Came out of government officials of Alberta. So I guess you still know more than I do, even though it came out of the Alberta official's mouth, that anything we do in this country, the first world people are involved in the decision making. That's how Canada does it, is what this particular gentleman said that works for the Alberta government. So unless he's lying, then why would I not take his word because he's a government official in Canada? I can't prove he's lying. Just like I can't prove that this particular person that left their comments was giving truth or not, and vice versa with me. But as I always say, all I'm doing is giving my opinions and my life experience on this channel. If they're, for the most part, I try to be factual, but in the end, they're just my opinions. And if you give me facts that dispute that don't agree with my opinions, wonderful. That's great. Then I have to change my my thinking on that particular subject. Because I'm not here to necessarily lead anybody astray or tell people what they need to think. No, I'm just giving my opinions. Either you agree or you don't. That's all I'm doing. And I'm just giving my life experiences. That's all I'm doing on this channel. And, you know, take it as you will. If something I say is positive to you or influential to you, wonderful. If you're offended by it, then okay, you're offended by it. It's not my intent to offend, but if you are, then you are. It's just that simple. Just like now the Bible, depending on where you're at in the country, is considered hate speech. But I'm protected by the First Amendment of freedom of speech and freedom of religion. But depending on where you're at, they consider it hate speech. And they'll try to shut you down. That's not freedom. And you have the freedom not to like what I have to say, just like I had the freedom to say it. Hate speech is still free speech and still protected. That's a fact. It's just that simple. Now, if you're commenting and you live in another country, your freedoms are different than our freedoms. Your constitution is different than our constitution. So you can't put as this particular person was trying to do, put your laws on me because they don't apply to me. Just like my laws don't apply to you. Our laws are different. They have similarities, of course, but they don't apply. And freedom is not just speech, it's also action. I have the freedom to do whatever I want, but there are consequences. Just like with the issues we're having in the United States here with illegal immigration. They could cross the border illegally if they got away with they got away with crossing the border illegally, but there are consequences. Because there are laws on the books that say what you've done was illegal and that you can be deported. But yet people are trying to prevent us from executing laws that are on the books. Yes, they had the freedom to cross the border illegally. But now we have the freedom to send you back. And that's by law. And no, if you are not an American citizen, you do not have due process. Due process is something in the Constitution for American citizens. You do not have due process. You have human rights, which means we have to treat you humanely. But treating you humanely does not mean you have the right to go to court. You are not an American citizen. You do not have that right. You don't have that right. That freedom is not extended to you. That freedom is not extended to you. You are not an American citizen. It's tight, but it's right. So freedoms are being taken away by individuals because of their feelings. And this is what's wrong with society. We're too much into our feelings. Do we all have feelings? Of course we do. But we're allowing our emotions to override our brains and common sense. And that's what's wrong with society. And that's what's wrong with the example I gave there in, I believe it was Rochester, New York. They're trying to take the freedom of this woman away because of a word that she has every right to say. Should she say it? Of course not. But she has every right to say. And just because you're offended doesn't mean she broke the law. And any common sense judge would throw the case out of court. It's tight, but it's right. And one ethnic group has the right to say it, but all the other ethnic groups don't have the right to say it, which is hypocritical. You can't expect folks in other ethnic groups to stop saying something when you say it all the time. You say it in your music videos, you say it in conversations, you say it in movies. Stop being hypocritical. You know, sweep your own house out before you tell somebody else to sweep their house out. That's exactly what that is. Sweep your own house out first before you tell somebody else to clean their house. That's just common sense. Just like when you get on an airplane, they tell you put your mask on first before you help somebody else with their mask. Duh. Because you're no good to nobody when you're dead. So that's what I got to say about that. Again, we're talking about freedom and how freedom is not being taken away by the government. Though the last administration was taking free speech away, they were definitely all for cancel culture and everything else. But it's not so much the government than it is individuals and groups. Yeah, the government is complicit. Just like, and I'll even go this route. Just like, even though the current administration is getting rid of all these books because of DEI, I don't think they should take these books out of libraries because people have the right to read whatever they want. Again, this is one thing I disagree with the administration on. I understand you want to take DEI out of hiring and all that stuff, and I'm all for that. It should definitely be merit-based. But when it comes to reading material, okay, depending on the material, yes, I can see taking it out of schools. But public libraries, university libraries, no, because people are gonna, people have a right to read whatever they want. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to check it out. In grade schools, K through 12, yeah, we need to take stuff like that out. But in colleges and universities and in public libraries and even private libraries, no, leave the books alone. That's what libraries are for. They're a depository of books. Not everybody agrees with all the books that are in the library. Leave those alone. In higher education, leave them libraries alone. Regular public libraries, leave them alone. I can understand primary and secondary schools, K through 12. But colleges, universities, no, leave them alone. Leave them alone. You ain't got to like the books, you ain't got to check them out. It's just that simple. We should be given the freedom to read the books or not read the books. Children don't have that freedom because they're children. Their parents have the say-so in what children learn. That's why I say if the parents don't like the books that are in public education in K through 12, they have the right to get them books removed. Because it's the parents' responsibility to make sure that child gets an education, not the teacher. The teacher is there just to teach. It is not the teacher's responsibility to make sure that child learns. That is up to that child and that parent. It's just that simple. But when we get to higher education, that's different. We're now adults. We should be given that choice. You don't have to agree with DEI, and you don't have to like the books that talk about it. But guess what? You ain't got to check them out. Again, we're talking about freedom here. I don't agree with the administration on that. Even the books in the military academies, leave them alone. Them cadets are smart. If they want to read it, fine. If they don't want to read it, fine. they're going to find out once they get out and graduate the academy that some of the stuff they read ain't going to work in the real world, nor in the real military. They'll find out real quick. Don't worry, they'll find out. They'll get weeded out real quick. Same with regular university, public or private. It doesn't matter whether they believe in DEI or not. When they get out to the DEI or not, when they get to the real world, they'll find out. They'll find out. See, the real world has a great way of weeding folk out. Because like I told my JROTC cadets that I talked to, when you get out in the real world, it's cruel. And it will weed you out if you're not ready for it. If you're not ready for it, you will get weeded out. You will get spit back out. The real world is cruel. And you have to be prepared. The freedoms that we have people have died for one, but they're God-given. So stop infringing on them and leave them alone. You ain't got to agree with it. Stop letting words affect you so much. Grow a spine. It's not, you don't always have to fight fire with fire. You know, the honey vinegar analogy. Yes, there are times you fight fire with fire. Most definitely. But not all the time. Sometimes you got to take the high road. Sometimes you got to keep your mouth shut. There's more than one way of skinning a cat, as they say. There's more than one way of fighting a battle. And it's not always going to be an eye for an eye. You have to use wisdom and common sense. And to allow one word to affect a whole portion of a community where they're asking for her to go to jail is absolutely ridiculous and idiotic and stupid, and won't hold up in court. Again, should she have used the word? No. And she is seeing the consequences of her using the word. Believe me, she's hearing the consequences. But that doesn't mean, that doesn't mean that she committed a crime. The only crime that she committed was a crime of stupidity, the crime of no wisdom, the crime of no common sense, and the crime of offending somebody else. None of them will hold up in legal court. Won't hold up. So, like I said, freedom is being infringed on, not necessarily by the government, but by individuals and groups are the worst offenders, especially on social media. Everybody's offended on both sides of the aisle. I'm just not focusing on the leftists. There are hardcore folk on the right that get just offended. They get just as offended. Put it out there. Freedom applies to everybody, regardless of your political affiliation, your ethnicity, your religious beliefs, whatever it is. It applies to everyone. And just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing. Bible says everything is lawful, but not everything is expedient. Hello? We've got to use some wisdom and common sense. We've got to use these brains that God gave us. The lady was wrong for using the word. I don't know why she used the word. I don't know what precipitated her to use the word. But it doesn't matter what precipitated it. She should have never used the word in the first place. Thankfully, she didn't do any physical harm to this child. Especially if it was an autistic child. People are too easily offended. And that, in my opinion, is why freedom isn't free anymore, because we're too offended. Freedom isn't free anymore because of society we live in. Everybody's in their feelings, and that's what's wrong with our society today. Church folk are just as guilty as worldly folk. Church folk are just as guilty as worldly folk. Church folk are so focused on the fact that, you know, so-and-so is in office that they forget about the fact that we're in this world, but we're not of this world. They forget about all that. I don't get it. We're just, travelers passing through. But they forget about that. All their common sense goes out the window. And that's black and white pastors. All of them are guilty. To include my own, to include pastors in my Reformation and my presiding bishop. I don't agree with the fact that he endorsed a candidate. That's not your job. What you do in private is your business. You want to vote? You wanted to vote for Vice President Harris? Then go vote for Vice President Harris. But don't tell me to go vote for her. And don't, in your position as presiding bishop, endorse a worldly candidate when you know that party doesn't stand for biblical principles. And I'm not saying the Republicans are beacons of truth. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But as I've said, we have to pick from the better of two evils. And so there you go. No, I don't agree with my presiding bishop. He's still my presiding bishop. He's still the leader of my Reformation. But you were wrong for endorsing a candidate. I don't care if you endorse President Trump. That's not your job. Your job as a spiritual leader is not to endorse worldly candidates. Your job is just to say, look, vote for the person who best encapsulates biblical principles. And that's who you should vote for. Period. And that's all he should have said. But no, he didn't do that. I don't agree with politics in church. I am vehemently against it. There's no place for politics in church. All it's done is ruin our church. That's all it's done. That's all it's done. And I've lost respect for my presiding bishop because of that. I respect his position, but I don't respect the man as much, because you did something that you shouldn't have did. Who you vote for is your business. If you want to tell your friends who you voted for, by all means. But don't do it as a presiding bishop of a Christian Reformation. That is not your job to endorse a candidate. That was wrong. I don't care how you twist it around. And I don't care if you endorse President Trump. That's not your job to endorse a candidate. I voted for President Trump because I felt he stood more, he stood for more of the things that I believe in and stood for more biblical principles than Vice President Harris. Just that simple. You vote on policies, and if you're religious, Christian, Muslim, whatever, you vote for religious belief. That's how you vote. have the freedom to do that. But as an ordained elder in the Churches of God in Christ, which is a Reformation I belong to, I am not endorsing candidate when I am acting in the role of an ordained elder. That is inappropriate and wrong. When I'm at home or I can't even endorse a candidate on my job. So why would pastors and bishops feel that they can do that when, if you're a federal worker, you're not even allowed to endorse a candidate? Dog, if the world has enough common sense to tell its own workers not to endorse a candidate, shouldn't the church be better? But again, he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted to. And I respect the fact that he had the freedom to do it. Should he have done it? No, he shouldn't have. Along with all the other black and white preachers and bishops that did the same thing on both sides of the aisle. They're wrong. That's not what God promoted you to do. Keep the world out the church as much as possible. And endorsing a candidate is not keeping the world out the church. You're actually bringing the world into the church when you do that. And endorsing a candidate that belongs to a party that endorses unbiblical views, we shouldn't be doing. The Bible doesn't believe in homosexuality. The Bible doesn't believe in abortion. But yet you're endorsing a candidate that believes those things. How can you endorse a candidate that believes in abortion and homosexuality? And again, you have the freedom to live as a homosexual. I ain't got no issues with it. Just don't push it on me. Live what you live. Live that lifestyle. Again, I have an uncle who lives that lifestyle. I love my uncle. I don't agree with his lifestyle, but I love my uncle because he's family. You have the freedom to live whatever you want. Call yourself whatever you want to do, but don't push it on nobody else. Live your life and live it. I have the freedom not to live it. See, freedom is more than just speech. I was just using that one example to start this whole conversation. Freedom is exactly what it is. Freedom. You're free to do whatever you want, but there are consequences. And I don't need the government nor individuals to tell me the consequences. The consequences are written in the law, and society will make sure that you get the consequences you deserve. And most of all, God will deal with you if you're saved. That's it. I don't need individuals to tell me what I can and can't do. I can do whatever I want. But I got to understand that in doing whatever I want, there are consequences. And don't cry when the consequences come. That's the other part. Then when you cry, when you get caught, or when you find out that what you did was wrong, then you want to cry. Well, the justice system is racist and this, that, and the other. No. You were wrong and you got caught. Man up, woman up, and take your punishment. That's the other thing about freedom. When you do things that you feel that you have the right to do, just know there are consequences. There are consequences. Consequences. And be man or woman enough to take them and own up to it. Don't say something. Don't throw a rock and then hide your hand. No, I threw the rock. If you're big and bad enough to say what you want to say, then own up to it when you get proven wrong, or you find out that's against the law or something to that effect. Own up. Own up. Own up. That's all I got to say. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you have a comment, by all means, leave it in the comments section. Again, as always, we don't have to agree. And not everybody's going to agree with what I got to say. What I say are my opinions and my life experiences. Pure and simple. They're not politically motivated. It's just how I feel. If you don't like it, that's okay. If you leave a comment, be respectful. If not, they'll just get deleted. And you will too, if you're, whatever. I'm not dealing with disrespect. I'm going to respect the fact that you may or may not agree with what I have to say. And you don't have to like it. And that's cool. And I respect that. Because everybody has their own opinions and life experiences. We are not all robots. Okay? This is, we're not dealing with AI here. Okay? We all have different opinions. And I respect that. Just like I respected this particular person that left at least 8 or 9 comments on that Canada video. That person didn't agree with me, but I was respectful to that person. And when I answered that person, I wasn't trying to argue, because I'm not going to argue with nobody. I was respectful, and I just let them know that, hey, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. Whether they were respectful, whether they meant to be derogatory to me or not, oh well. Maybe I wasn't smart enough to catch it. When he called me a common American. Well, I kind of am a common American, so it's really not a derogatory statement. He might have meant it as such, but I didn't take it as such. I am a common American. I'm nobody special. So, and I resisted the temptation of calling him a common Canadian, because I just didn't feel it was necessary. He didn't agree. It's all good. And I wish him well. And I have no hard feelings to him. But I use that example because he was trying to say that I didn't have the freedom to say what I wanted to say, and that he was saying that I'm just, toting the line. Well, you don't know me like that. You don't know if I'm toting the line or not. You haven't bothered to take the time to even understand my view on things and my life experience. You're just assuming. And we know what assume means. So, anyways, until the next time, we will talk to you again. God bless you.